Hey, my name is Lawrence Sher, and I'm on the Cinematography podcast.
The following podcast contains explicit language. You're listening to the Cinematography podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Coming to you from the world headquarters of Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California, are your hosts, Ben Rock and Ilya Friedman.
Hey there, Ben Rock.
Ah! You snuck up on me.
Yeah, not really. That seemed very forced and fake. There was nothing authentic about your mock surprise there.
Yeah, the first time it was real, but you weren't recording, so.
Damn it. Everyone will just have to know that you looked truly terrified for a second, and we tried to.
Anyway, welcome to the Cinematography podcast, everybody.
This is the Cinematography podcast. We are back again with a returning champion, Lawrence Sher, who, of course, has a new movie, The Joker, Part 2, Folie à Deux, I believe is how you pronounce that. I cannot speak French, so I'm not going to try.
Me neither.
But he's going to be on the show in just a few minutes. But first, our close focus.
And now, close focus.
There's a lot of things that we could yak about, but what was the thing that you believe that we should dive into in a real way here?
Well, I mean, it's a business decision, but I feel like it belies a bigger trend, perhaps, and that's that with the let's say not wonderful box office response to Kraven the Hunter,
Less than spectacular, yeah.
Sony, who's basically had a contractually okay reason to keep making Spider-Man villain movies, which include things like Venom, Morbius, Madam Web, Kraven the Hunter. Those are the four they did. Venom's did quite well, actually.
Certainly the last one. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, they all did pretty well, I think. And but basically Sony is shelving this project. And it's not the first time that a major studio has said, "Hey, we're going to create an extended universe." Got into it, although this might be the furthest anyone's gotten into it. Like I remember Universal was going to do their Dark Universe, and it started with Dracula Untold and Tom Cruise in The Mummy. And after that, they were like, nope, not doing that. And
remember that thing we said we were going to do? Not so much. Yeah.
Well, it's like didn't resonate. And you kind of brought up that it's like, well, it's kind of like this dark, let's turn the villain into an anti-hero kind of thing, which I hate to say kind of thematically goes into this episode where we're talking about Joker, which, like Joker is a beautiful film and Lawrence did a great job with it. Joker 2, rather. Both Jokers. He shot both of them.
Yeah.
But didn't resonate with audiences quite the same way that they had hoped.
And it's... Yeah,
but like this is like a whole like Sony, who originally had Spider-Man, like the original Sam Raimi Spiders-Man, which that is the correct plural of Spider-Man.
Spiders-Man?
It's not Spider-Man. I guess it could be Spider-Mans. It's like Attorneys General. Anyway, Sony made the original Sam Raimi ones, the ones that starred Andrew Garfield. That was all Sony, and then it went back to Marvel, and now Spider-Man is in the MCU and kind of part of the Avengers ish, and all that. But Sony still had some rights to the Spider-Man universe, and so that was what gave us Venom, Madam Web, et cetera, and now, especially in the wake of Morbius, which I feel like the Morbius trailer was on to every movie my entire life.
For a moment there, hot second,
like it was. Like going back to the 70s, I think I saw Morbius trailers,
they had a media blitz for sure.
But it was starred Jared Leto, big deal, big star, Oscar winner, flopped. And then Madam Web, which the star of which basically kind of disowned the project before it even came out. So that didn't do well. And I remember seeing the trailers for Madam Web and being like, what the hell is this anyway? And I feel like they're just not good at kind of bringing these properties out to whoever's trying to create awareness of these things. And Kraven the Hunter, that's yet another one, you know. But anyway, it's just kind of a weird end of an era of putting anti-heroes in the lead role over at Sony specifically.
Yeah, at Sony specifically, but you have to wonder about Warner Brothers too with Joker 2, because look, I love Joker 2. We get into how much I love Joker 2 in the interview with Larry in a few minutes.
Let's just say I liked Joker 2. I don't think that I have the enthusiasm for it as a movie that you did. Obviously, I think Larry's work is second to none, just next level amazing.
Quentin Tarantino liked it, famously went out, and I think he said it on the Joe Rogan podcast that he liked the movie too. And look, there are
John Waters loved it.
John Waters loved it. There's quite a few critics actually. If you go to Metacritic,
there are people who jumped in Tarantino's shit about liking it, and then he kind of made some headlines basically saying like, up yours. I get to like whatever movie I want to like. And I completely support Quentin Tarantino. And actually, deep in my heart, I don't care if people like movies that I don't like. It's really okay.
Yes, that's really true. There's an awful lot of movies that you really like that I do not like. And you and I can still stay great friends. We just know that we don't have the same taste in movies.
Totally normal. That's how people are with taste and liking of things.
That is exactly how that is. So I think, though, that between maybe the and look, I mean, I feel like $200+ million at the box office doesn't sound like a really bad day for Joker 2, but between that and what's happening at Sony, are audiences just over the idea of a villain or an anti-hero? I mean, we had a lot of anti-heroes on television for a long time. People would joke that the AMC network was like all anti-heroes. Breaking Bad and whatnot, and then continuing, and then it seemed like is everything on television going to be so dark? Well, is that happening with movies now? Is there going to be a pendulum swinging back the other way? Yeah. I really don't know. So maybe we see less of like the big
Wicked is a huge hit, and Wicked is about an anti-hero. You know, like
it is an anti-hero.
She becomes the Wicked Witch of the West eventually, and I guess I'll be seeing how in a year or so. But you know, I think that maybe kind of the dark, oppressive tone of a lot of these things is just wearing people out. I don't know. I could say this. I am not a giant comic book guy. I didn't know who the hell Morbius or Kraven the Hunter or Madam Web were. And obviously we all know who the Joker is, and the first Joker was a huge smash hit. And, you know, who knows why the second one underperformed at the box office. That's not really what we're here to talk about. But I would argue personally that outside of Venom, I didn't know who any of these characters were. And, you know, and I saw the trailer for Kraven the Hunter, and it looked like another CGI fest of, you know, just like, I don't know, it looked like watching someone else play a video game. That's what it looked like to me. I'm sure that a lot of amazing, talented people made it, and I don't mean to offend any of them. But you know, I would almost say that I would park that at the feet of who's marketing it, how the trailer was put together, like kind of the concept from the very beginning.
You know, I feel like maybe this will either cause Sony to go with bigger, better known sort of tentpole properties, maybe, or maybe it'll usher in a new era of original IP. Now, granted, the second one I think is less likely, but they bet a lot of money on, you know, people who were fans of Spider-Man and were interested in seeing, you know, certain villains. And you could argue it might be all about execution, but ultimately at the end of the day, I'm sure they were very disappointed that the numbers that they were banking on coming from like the Marvel universe just weren't really what they wanted. So I don't know. Maybe we'll see what happens to, you know, IP going forward. It'll certainly be interesting. It won't be boring. Maybe something unexpected will happen. We'll have to wait and see.
Holy crap! I just looked it up. The Kraven the Hunter was shot by Ben Davis.
Wow,
like one of the greats. His work is amazing
for sure.
Now I want to see it. I guess I'll be able to see it sooner than I would have. Anyway.
You definitely will. All right. Why don't we get to the interview with Larry Sher?
The Cinematography Podcast Interview.
Hey, welcome back to the show, Lawrence Sher. Hey, great to have you back on the show again.
Hey, it's great to be back. I'm excited to talk about whatever we're going to talk about. Everything and everything. Anything, everything, all at once.
That's right. We're gonna talk about everything, everywhere, all at once. No, uh, you've got a couple of things that we really ought to talk about. One, we want to talk about ShotDeck
Big
because
time.
in the past we've never. I mean, we may have mentioned it in passing, but never when you were on the show. We've talked about it plenty, but never like in conversation with you about like the everything behind it. So we'll get into that, and we definitely got to talk about Joker 2, which I just watched, and I don't know if I'm in the minority, but I thought it was fantastic. And I really, really loved all the work that you did on it.
You're in the silent majority.
You
That's
know
what I
what?
like to say.
Maybe it's a silent majority, but
It's a growing silent majority. No, yeah, exactly. No, I appreciate. Listen, I love the film, and I'm wildly proud of it. And let's talk about it as well, for sure.
all right. So where should we start? Ben, do you want to, you have used ShotDeck way more than I have. Do you want to?
I'm a member of ShotDeck. I've been using ShotDeck for the last few years, and every time I have to communicate any idea to somebody, that's probably the first place I go. Like if I need to, I just had a pitch meeting last week where they wanted me to make a pitch deck, and I think it's interesting because I feel like 10 years ago in the business, if you were pitching a story, you would need a rip reel. And I'm a pretty good editor, so I'm used to making those. And then somewhere along the line, people stopped caring about rip reels and started wanting pitch decks and lookbooks. And ShotDeck is like quite simply the best resource. And I tell people about it all the freaking time, but it's the best resource if you're trying to show people what kind of movie you want to make.
And Larry,
That's it. That's a wrap. That's a wrap. Thank you, guys.
Goodbye.
We got the commercial. We're good.
All right. Nice knowing you. But it's your brainchild, right? When did you start working on this? When did this come to be?
Yeah, so and thank you for that. Exactly the same reasons, Ben, you talked about why it's valuable to you is the same reason that we built it and why if we go all the way back to Garden State, and I was like a late comer in that interview. I have a close friend who was a key grip on Scrubs, Sean Kroll, and Sean's like, Zach's making this movie, and I was like, well, how can I get in there? And I fought my way into like the last interview on a Friday. And of course, when you go in, you're just trying as a DP or as a director or anything, you're just trying to express your vision. And back then it was like I would basically go grab screen grabs from like movies and DVDs. I'd buy cheap Blu-rays or back then it was DVDs. And it was this really arduous process. The problem with Google Images or other places where those images weren't cinematic. And so there was this lack of cinematic images, which is the language we speak in when we communicate. And so over time, and that was 20 years ago, right? And ShotDeck in its inception started almost 10 years ago. But in that in-between time, it was just like doing it this really inefficient way. And I remember at one point, my dad, who was retired and is an avid photographer, I was like, hey, if I gave you all these screen grabs, could you start cataloging them in all these keywords on Lightroom? And I was like, I'll pay you. And anyway, it never came to be. But over time, it was like, if this thing isn't built, I'm going to be really upset with myself. And I was an economics major in college. So there's a part of me that was really interested in also just building something. And so found a designer and an engineer, and we started building it all the way back in 2015, actually. And the idea was to build something that I would want to use every day, and figuring if it was something I needed, that the industry at large would also find it valuable. And it was just born out of necessity. And so then obviously over time, we opened it up into a beta and then a bigger beta and then turned it into a proper company in 2020. So it's been one of the great joys of the last 10 years for me, and has been a really exciting process to sort of build something from the ground up. And this tool that we continue, prior to this, I was in 3 hours of meetings with ShotDeck. So it's something we really care about, and we're constantly trying to iterate on it and make it even more valuable for future users. So
how do the rights work with that? I always wonder, like, if you're posting an image from a movie that's, copyrighted, what are, I mean, obviously for years you would just go on Google and do a Google image search and throw an image into your Photoshop document, yada yada, and whatever. And it's okay to use it in this way because you're not selling it or distributing it. So you're not stealing their
It's,
image, but in a
that's right.
sense, you are putting their image up and you have a subscription. So people are paying to have access to this database. How do the rights pan out for that?
In short, it's a sort of a complex web of inter connected rights issues, but in large part, it works in a similar way in that the terms and use of ShotDeck are so specifically defined, and most people don't read them, but we make sure that we enforce them, which is the only intentional use of those images. It's not a stock footage site. We're not selling the images. What you're actually buying is access to the architecture of the search engine, which is really what ShotDeck is. But the images at large are basically used specifically for internal pitch decks, presentations. It's there to get your future work. And the reason the studios are on board with it is because their filmmakers are using it currently. They have been trying to do this. We just basically made it much more efficient for them to find these images and catalog them all in one place. And so, in large part, that's basically how the rights work in a more sort of global way to think about it.
Now, did you see that? I mean, maybe for cinematographers, pitch deck culture was already prevalent 20 years ago. But did you see that like that was going to become kind of the main way that directors, DPs, production designers, whatever, often communicate with people to get employment? Like, again, I had a meeting about directing a project and they said, we want to see a pitch deck. They told me to make a pitch deck. And so it's like, oh, there goes a day of building a pitch deck for these people. But, the first place, obviously, I went was there. But when do you think pitch deck culture became kind of the thing everybody needed to, like, when did that become a skill? We didn't go to school to become graphic designers, but here we are.
Yeah, I'd say probably in the last 5 years, I've seen it really grow in a real way. For me, interestingly enough, the way I use ShotDeck and the way that I think actually it's most valuable is after you get the job. Like the pitch deck is a part of it, but in my day to day, what I realized was every director I communicated with, whether it was before the job, whether it was once I got the job through prep, and all the way through the communication with all the other departments, we were constantly in need. Now was like where we really were in need of communicating the idea, right? So I'll give you an example. In 2016, shit, no, maybe it was 2015. Oh no, it was 2014 because it was pre-Shot Deck. I did a bunch of like additional photography on Godzilla, the Gareth Edwards Godzilla, right? And Seamus wasn't available, and so I filled in for him. And Gareth would just deliver me a bunch of folders with screen grabs to communicate like, okay, we're doing this little scene in which we're like in the sort of the ship at sea, and they're basically giving all this exposition. And Ken Watanabe's like basically describing, him and Sally Hawkins are like describing where Godzilla came from. And I remember that was how Gareth helped communicate his vision for what this should look like. It was like images from Nixon, and it was like that was the way he communicated. And I thought that's how everything happens. Every time I'm in a meeting, it's like, well, it's like what are some Vegas movies that we can talk about? It's like, oh, remember that scene in Casino, or oh, what happened in Vegas, whatever it is, Casino, Ocean's 11, 12, 13, all that. It's like in every meeting we were sort of talking about other movies, and we needed this portable way to share it and say, yeah, like this. And that, so to me, and that goes all the way through production and all the way through post. So the pitch deck was one aspect of it, but I use ShotDeck almost exclusively sort of from the job, getting the job forward. So it was throughout the whole process that I saw a need for these kind of like this communication device. Yeah.
Do you think it ever, like when you're in the process of like making a film and you're using it, does it ever lead you down the road of like, I'm making a Vegas thing, and so you get a bunch of Ocean's 11 shots or whatever. Like, is it lead you down the road of making your stuff feel more like something that already existed, or is it easy for you and actually a corollary of that is it make the producer or director more committed to making it look or feel like something that somebody's already done, or is it just
Yeah.
like a quick shorthand to say like medium shot in a casino and here's 5 examples.
Yeah, for me, it almost exclusively makes me find the next original thing, right? It's literally a leaping off point for conversation. So sometimes it can just be, I remember doing this movie ages ago called Grilled, and it was like a Ray Romano, Kevin James, like Jason Ensler directed it. And I remember thinking, we have so much of this movie inside a car. And so, yeah, invariably we could take a finder and a bunch of lenses and we march around a car, right? How do you shoot a car? Hostess tray from the sides, frontal two shot, frontal singles, reverse overs, all these things, right? And we could go out and do that. But the best way is you go, let's just look up all the car stuff on ShotDeck. And I remember at that point, I literally broke down Training Day. This is pre-ShotDeck. Broke down every scene in Training Day and created like a PDF of
Oh
every
wow.
shot to like communicate like, okay, this is how Training Day. And now none of that examples are in Grilled. Our own thing is in there, but it was a leaping off point to go, oh, I like it more on the long lens, like certain frontal two shots driving, right? Because I'm like, where the hell is the camera? It's like, is it on a insert car ahead of it? Is it a hood mount? Now, sometimes I don't mind it sometimes weirdly in other people's movies. It's like a hood mount close, wide, or a longer lens, Ridley or Tony Scott, car to car, like on an insert car, like Thelma and Louise, for lack of a better example. But all those things, it's like, well, what do you respond to? And how do you get there with a director or, any department? And so it's just a way for us to go, yeah, 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 I like that. And then from there, you take it off and you make it your own, right?
Mm.
And so for me, it's often pointing out what it isn't, right? Like people like to talk about the influence of, let's say, a movie like Joker, and they always, of course, bring up Taxi Driver and
King of comedy.
the King of Comedy, or even Network or something.
Mm.
We never really watched those films, but I would bring up some images from like Network because it was like 70s influential movie, right? None of that is in Joker. But what it did was sort of go, oh, my memory of this had something. What was my memory and what was I responding to when I think of that? It's probably more the content of the movie, but it wasn't, it's like what it allowed us to do is sort of go, it's not that. What is it? And it just narrows you into like then creating, I think, something completely original. But of course, those are already in our brain,
Mm.
all those things. We're just now allowing it to like, because everybody, I don't care who it is, it's difficult to communicate creative ideas with words. And I think having something where you can point to and go, it's too saturated. I don't like that. It's too wide. It's too tight. Whatever that is, how do you get there with a director? And the easiest way is to like have them show images. Like to me, if I present them with a big deck of a bunch of images, all I have to do is see what they respond to. That's going to tell me everything about their aesthetic and what they're interested in. And then I would say to them, oh, jump on ShotDeck, just create 4 folders: composition, lighting, tone, and something else, just like a favorites thing, and just start filling it with images that catch your eye. And that alone will tell me so much about what they're interested in as from a cinematography standpoint, from a color, everything. Or like, oh, I need a black eye. Yeah, a makeup artist will sketch up a bunch of different black eyes or maybe show a bunch of pictures. But it's funny, it's not until it's lit and in a movie that it really represents what that black eye is going to look like. So what better way is to like show a bunch of black eyes from movies and go, yeah, yeah, that one's great. That one's that, and then it helps you get to where you're going for your specific project. So no, I don't think it makes you feel like you're then copying that thing. I think it allows you to actually, find inspiration to go make your thing, is really how I look at it.
That's cool. I mean, I think that's a great way to think about it. Now, like, how do you go about selecting the films and TV shows and stuff? Because it's Stuff all over the spectrum, stuff all, cross culturally. It's not all movies. There's lots of TV stuff in there. How do you go about curating what you put in there?
It's a vast process, right? We have a on the site you can request, and we get enough requests over a certain title that bumps everything up to the top of the list. We try to do things that we like. We have a curation team, a head of content that sort of helps curate it. We try to, as best we can, and we continue to try to do even better, is find diversity across the entire world, right? That's something we're constantly going, well, can we get somebody who's an expert in Colombia or in Thailand? And I went to Taiwan recently for Sundance Asia, and I was like, can you help me find great Taiwanese films that I don't know about so I can get them up on ShotDeck, right? Because we don't know everything. So it's like it's a curation like that. We'll have filmmakers reach out to us all the time. We'll have studios reach out to us and say, "Can you get all of this season on because our creatives actually want it so they can have it at the ready for future seasons." So it's like we get it from all sorts. We'll get indie filmmakers and we try to
Like indie filmmakers saying, "Hey, can you put my film on ShotDeck?"
yeah. Now that doesn't always get you on ShotDeck. It's not like we're gatekeepers, but we do like to say that the curation of ShotDeck is also part of what makes ShotDeck work as well. We don't try to just splash everything on there. But at some, in the grand scheme of things, I would love for ShotDeck to be so ubiquitous that it's effectively like the visual IMDb, right? It's got everything. So if I need to look at episodes of Happy Days, it's got that, right? Like I haven't put them on yet, but like at some point during Joker Folie, Deux, it's like I want to look at some Cher episodes. They're not on Blu-ray, but I got a box set of Sonny and Cher on VHS, and I grabbed some screen grabs. And it might have just been a conversation with the production designer or even with my camera operators to say, here's the sizing that I like so that we can be somewhat, so it feels like those shows, even though mostly in the movie we're shooting with objective cameras that aren't the sort of TV cameras. But the you see in the even in that there's 3 TV cameras, shooting it.
Yeah.
Those TV cameras, I showed them a little book of like, here's the sizing. Same with Murray Franklin. So I went back to like Johnny Carson episodes and all that kind of stuff. So should that be on ShotDeck now? It's not, but eventually, yeah, sure. I have everything. I want 1 billion shots on there.
I mean, is like how onerous is the cataloging of it? Because I could go on ShotDeck and do a search for woman golden hour over the shoulder coffee cup, and if that shot exists, I'm going to find it, and I might find 10 versions of it from 10 different sources.
Sure. Yeah, it's process. It's a process. Like it's all manually curated, right?
Yeah,
So it's not.
I was
a
wondering if
computer or
AI
anything.
had, like I think about Strata uses AI to
Yeah,
meta
sure.
tag everything. So I was wondering if you'd ever thought about using some kind of AI just to handle the tagging part.
Yeah. We, unlike even some other people, we found, or at least early days, like going back to 2015, it wasn't there yet. So we built a structure that was still manually tagged. Now, we have sort of allowed some categories, which just we've discovered and trained very specifically a model to do it. It's more accurate and faster. So we've had some categories that we could switch over to machine learning, and but we still QA all of it. We still have a human being checking it all. And then we have a lot of also manual stuff. So manually curating those images is still a big part of it, and we have discussions all the time of like, okay, when do those things intersect? And to just really get it to scaling and all that. But we like our results so far. So it's basically a moving target of like continuing to scale and find efficiencies in the tagging. Yeah, we have a lot of plans. I'm not going to take you through them all right now, Ben.
But so how much, like as a cinematographer, as an artist, how much of your cinematography, how much of the oxygen in your cinematography world goes into ShotDeck instead of shooting another movie or making another movie of some kind?
I mean, I work on ShotDeck a lot, but what I would say is I've probably been as prolific and the work that I've been doing, I'm really proud of in the time that I've built ShotDeck than even before ShotDeck. So I would say it hasn't taken away from my shooting. If anything, it's sort of helped me find a nice balance and allowed me to pick jobs that that I really care deeply about, and don't necessarily have to grind away because not because ShotDeck makes me money. It doesn't, because I don't really take anything from it, but it's it allows me to go, well, I actually like having 3 months downtime so I can really focus on ShotDeck 100% and then jump back in full force to go make a movie.
It's one of the ones people should avoid using because they get used too much.
Do you have a top 10?
I mean, by the way, well, yeah, you go.
I have a theory of one, but I want to see if I'm right.
It's always interesting to us because like you go to the top shots on ShotDeck, which is on like the homepage, right? Or you can go to most popular and just search the whole site on browse shots by most popular, and you'll see. And we've changed that algorithm a lot to try to make it more like current because, of course, historically there are shots from the beginning of ShotDeck that are outweighted. So we try to balance that out with a different algorithm because, of course, there's a handful of, shots from, Deacons and, all these sort of like, very just referential shots,
The one I see in every deck is that shot from Seven with the gun in focus and
that's
Kevin
a great
Spacey
shot.
out of focus. It's a beautiful shot, Darius Kanji. But like I've seen that shot used so many times in decks and also rip reels. It's like the most common one to use.
Yeah. Well, it's dynamic. I mean, that depth of field is such a dynamic aspect of it. I mean,
it's raining. It's a beautiful shot.
All of it. I mean, listen, but just like that, when I remember at one point thinking like, how do you catalog the history of cinematography by its influence over future films, right? And you could think about it for like decades, whether it's like French Connection, maybe, or Bullet, changed the way we shot Car, whatever. It could be whatever it is, right? Seven, as somebody who started my career in the early 90s, was one of those films. It changed the way like, whether it was just when they're chasing down the hall and it's handheld and hectic. I made a movie 2 years later in which Seven was constantly being talked about, right? It's like, and you can go through that in so many different like
bleach bypass, everybody using,
absolutely. Or when Saving Private Ryan came out and it was sort of like the heightened shutter angle look, and that thing changed the way like movies look for a little while, right? And that keeps going. So you think about those movies that are sort of somebody, I don't know, we should do it at ShotDeck. It's like the most influential movies of all time based on cinematography. Certainly the ASC has made a list like that too. But if you define influential as like how it affected future looks of movies, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, some movies, amazingly enough, and this is a little bit hearsay, so forgive me, but like are movies in which the director and the DP fought each other. Like Blade Runner historically, and I don't know Ridley, so forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn, but the word on the street, and maybe this is just cinematographers talking, is that he was not happy with what Jordan Cronenberg was doing.
Oh, wow.
They were fighting over the look of that film. The film becomes one of the most influential looking movies of all time. Supposedly, and maybe if you think about they never worked together again, David Fincher and Darius Kanji were not in lockstep over the look of Seven. One of the most influential movies of the 90s, right? It's like, and so that's also an interesting thing, right? Is where those things, it's like this intersection of, of this like butting heads creatively that can result in something that then becomes, one of the most interesting parts of a movie.
Well, I think that's a great place for us to transition to talking about Joker 2. Talk about your relationship with Todd Phillips. Were you guys always in agreement and alignment then for the look of this movie?
It's funny that as I was saying those words, I thought to our entire career, is like, and Todd and I have had this remarkable, it's been my most fruitful creative relationship and just as a friendship. It's 15 years, 7, 8 films, something like that, whatever it is, right? It's substantial, and we have these little quibbles all the time, right? I mean, it's part of the process. It's like, and the best thing about it is it challenges both of us to sort of push each other a little outside of our comfort zone, right? So, and each one, I mean, listen, we would have almost comically joking things about Joker, where he'd go, "The studio's calling me and saying it's too dark," which of course I knew was a lie. And I would go, "The ASC is calling me and saying you can't make it any bright. You can't. It's too bright." And it's like we would have these arguments, right? And by the way, I know dark movies. Joker is not a dark movie, but we would have these conversations all the time.
Dark
And
lighting level wise.
yeah. Not
Oh, yeah.
content wise, and of course,
It's
yeah.
nihilistic for sure. So
Yeah, exactly. But I felt very strongly about like this direction feels really right. But we would, you think about it. I love color. I've always loved color. It's in Hangover. It's in Due Date. It's in every movie. Hangover 2, War Dogs, you name it. I embrace color. I have to push Todd there. You know what I mean? And it's like, and we have fights. I remember on Due Date, there's a scene in the rain where Zach and Downey are like sitting in like a rest stop, right? And it's raining out there. And I have like my little sodium vapor shit that I love. And to this day, Todd will be like, "You and your fucking colored light and blah, blah." And it's like he just gives me shit all the time about it. And I'm like, it's like it's a thing. So it doesn't stop. We still do that, right? And so yes, that's part of the relationship, and it's also I think healthy in that regard.
I think so too. I think that it's like married couples. They say that the couples that know how to fight, they know how to have a discussion, a disagreement, are those the ones that stick together. Those are the ones with the 50-year marriages. So okay.
When you stop arguing, that's when it's a real red flag. Yeah, exactly.
For sure. Okay. Well, let's talk about getting the band back together for Joker 2. Did it feel like, going to the same locations where we're going to try to change the look? We're going to try and keep it almost continuous, moving from one movie to the other. Talk about that pre-pro process of getting into the mindset for Joker 2.
Yeah, I think we did do some testing on some. First of all, with the cameras, we shot the same cameras, right? We shot every Alexa 65. Not that is the movie. But at one point, I tested 70 millimeter. I tested 15 perf IMAX, because I was like, well, the first movie did well. We can now sort of push that over the goal line if we wanted to go that way. It was awesome, but we still felt like we could get the consistency of the movie doing it with the same stuff. So we had similar in that regard. We wanted to continue this story so it felt like it was tied to the first one. But the biggest thing is obviously the fantasies, and that allowed us to do stuff that's not present in the first one, which is much more expressionistic and sort of, lighting that didn't have to be solely grounded on reality. Because even though all our films kind of have a bit of style, it's style that's based on like, here are the windows, and that's where the lighting comes from. It's not like suddenly the lighting is coming from some, random source but yet in a fantasy, we can now embrace lighting that doesn't have to be grounded by those same rules. And so I think that was the biggest departure and allowed us to be creative in different ways in terms of the way we could confront a scene. And I think one big thing is, a lot of the movie is like in a handful of locations that we built on stage. And so we built like all of Arthur's apartment and Murray Franklin's show. So there was a lot of stage work on the first movie, but this one has some much bigger stages and so that inherently sort of allows for some differences in the way that we can light it and the look and those kind of things. The fun thing about returning to some of the locations, obviously the stairs at the end and the stairs in the Bronx, is since Joker, it's now become, I think it's even on Google Maps as the Joker stairs. You can search it by that. And so every time we would scout it, there was like literally vans would pull up and people would stand in like the fifth step from the bottom and do their little pose. And they had no idea who we were. We're sitting there waiting for them to take their photos so we can keep scouting. And that was kind of surreal because you're like, oh, right. Yeah, this is now a thing, these steps, and we're going to return to it for this film.
Those steps and the Exorcist steps, the famous staircases in movie history.
That's right. That's right. So, yeah, I think that's exactly that. We sort of continued the look and then expanded upon it with all the sort of opportunities for the fantasy and how that could also change the way we move the camera, and that kind of stuff, I think. But wanted it to feel not like we were starting over.
Yeah, I think it was really successful, and the movie does a really good job of playing with your expectations of what sort of a superhero or anti-hero villain type of movie might be. And what I particularly enjoy about this movie is how it constantly violates your expectations, how it constantly keeps coming back around. And there's even a line in the movie of like, oh, we're not giving the audience what they want, and then they change the entire feeling right now. How much of the concept of expectations and playing with audience expectations and what's going on is in a conversation through the making of this movie, and is visually that happening as well too, of like what are the expectations you think you should be offering, and what are you giving in reality? Is this part of your conversation with Todd? How does this come to be?
You know, it's funny. It's part of it without ever speaking overtly about it, right? Like, there's no question. Listen, it's part of the script, as you bring up, right? Which is when you do a sequel to anything, right? And there can be a books about it, right? Particularly in light of like whatever it is, Moana 2 or Wicked or anything, right? And you have something that people now have a relationship with. The problem with any sequel is you're not no longer working in a vacuum. The first movie is basically, yes, there's IP of Joker and the Batman universe, but it's not really that kind of movie. So you're going well against people's expectations, and people embraced it because it was different, right? And then it becomes, but the second one, you no longer are living in that world. And we obviously, even in light of like its release and everything, we now learn that that's like a razor's edge, because you're now playing right into the heart of what people want. And that's exactly what that line is in the Joker and Harley show, where he stops. I have a feeling we're not giving people what they want. And this is the brilliance of Scott and Todd's script, is when you approach it. And by the way, this idea that like Todd just like took $200 million and just lit it on fire is absurd. It's beyond absurd. It's like actually ridiculous. The greatest thing about Todd as a filmmaker is, and he's always been this way, is he's at his heart a gambler. But he's a gambler in the way that movie business should be a gamble, right? It's that gamblers, you go 1-to-1 on your money. Yeah, you're gonna whatever. It's lame and boring. You want that whatever, that 10x, 100x bet, right? And it means you might lose. And so what I loved about the script, and I love about Todd, because we've done sequels before, we did Hangover 2, Hangover 3, I know what it feels like, is he's like, what are we doing this for if not to continue to express something that isn't simply trying to service the audience, right? Now that's a tricky slope, right? I get it. The audience is there. They embrace the first one, so you sort of have to understand. But we're speaking to the audience almost like during the movie and saying, we get it. This might not be what you wanted, but it's something different, right? And that speaks, and it says it right. It's at the end of the movie, we're speaking to it, right? And so it's throughout. And in a way, it's like, that's not it being meta. That's just it recognizing in I think, a really intelligent way that we're giving something that you might not have asked for. But in the same way as we didn't do on the first one, it just, it had a result that I think will be some sort of lesson for somebody in the future, and quite frankly, surprised us. I think going into the movie, I thought there was going to be a segment of the people that loved the first Joker that will be challenged by this and maybe not be on board. And then I thought there'd be a whole brand new audience that would be like, oh, this is really interesting. Time will tell what the ultimate sort of, fate of this movie is. But the movie we made and the way we approached it, it's exactly what we were trying to do. And so in that regard, it's like, it felt like a very pure experience. It's like we don't control the outcome, but we control all the other elements that we can do.
I got to say, again, playing with the expectations and I love the ending. I think the ending probably doesn't work for most people, but I love the ending of this movie. And at one moment, I think that the audience expectation is, oh, here it is. we're gonna, he's gonna break out of the courthouse. He's gonna, we're gonna set it up for a lifetime of sequels. And that's not the ending that you get. You feel like you get the absolute end that this movie should have. Can you talk about, I mean, because it has gravity and it fits, and maybe it just works for me, but can you talk about just sort of like the ending sequence here, like, the very end of
Yeah.
Arc Fleck of Joker?
Yeah. I mean, it's a tragedy, right? It's like his life is a tragedy, and in the truest sense of the word, it's like the history of that, and this is where I'm also a audience member, right? Like I remember when we finished Joker, I was like, and I remember seeing it for the first time fully, like everything, music. I was timing it, but I never saw it with an audience, and that also has a different feel. He's standing on the top of the car and he's doing this, and it's operatic.
Yeah.
And I was like, and this is why I'm a fucking lame I would be a lame screenwriter, right? I'm like, oh yeah, in my head I'm going, oh yeah, like a 40-year-old Joker and a teenage Bruce Wayne. This is like I was imagining a sequel. He's now running the city, but all the nonsense, which is frankly a bit of a cliche. And I remember then Todd sent me like the first 80 pages, right? And it's like the script that is the movie. But he didn't send me the last 20 pages because he hadn't finished writing it yet. And I was like, oh my God, I could really see where this is going, like where he breaks out of the courtroom and he goes, oh yeah, it's not going to go there. And it's like, so like even I, as somebody who made the first film and very closely, I'm still an audience member who's like not being delivered the thing that my brain wants it to be, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not absolved from that either. And yet the movie as it is exactly what it wants to be. And it's really the true story of Arthur Fleck and what his influence is on Joker, right? Future Jokers, whatever it is, right? It's like he's a vessel as like a person who's there to sort of represent an idea that then becomes something different than that or something greater than that or wherever you want to see it, right? But he's just a man who lives this tragic story, right? And has this moment in time in which he becomes a figurehead. I mean, this is a bad analogy, but like, look at this Luigi guy. I'm not saying he's influenced by Joker, but it's like there's a part of it where it's like people want
it's
to
very
hold
comic
on,
booky.
right?
Oh,
It's
for
like
sure.
he's this
Oh, for sure.
incredibly good-looking guy who is challenging something that we all are frustrated by in America, right? And you go, there are elements of what we're talking about, even this guy's story, And so that part of it is really, I think, what Todd and Scott and all of our filmmakers were trying to explore. And unfortunately, Luigi's ending will probably be similar. But I'm not saying, but meaning it's not a happy ending,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so to me, I felt like it was really pure and amazing and yet can be frustrating, Listen, I was frustrated as fuck by Uncut Gems. Now it's like I love it,
Mm.
right? Like sometimes movies can be frustrating.
For sure.
That movie, that movie, it will raise your blood pressure. It's one of the most stressful movie going experiences
Yeah.
I've ever had.
Yeah, and then punch you in the face at the end. And you're
Yeah.
like, right. Like it was not like I left the theater, singing, whatever. It's like whatever like people want to do when they leave a movie.
I,
I'm
I
still singing like it's popular. You want? I'm like it's still in my head. I get that that's really great. Like, it's I totally understand that.
I think that people have different expectations of movies. They have different expectations going in of what they're going to get from it. The Christmas Hallmark movie is a very different experience than going to see an art film. And sometimes you get very big, very successful, large franchise movies that are art films. And this to me feels like it's art. It's speaking to like,
Both of them, yeah.
yeah,
Both.
exactly.
Like
But
if
no,
it wasn't hanging, if they weren't hanging their hat on IP that that DC Comics has been dangling in front of us for a century, I feel like they would. I mean, I feel like that's where the Scorsese comparison comes in because Travis Bickle wasn't IP, but you're kind of playing with that kind of a character and setting up that kind of a world and paying it off, in ways the audience won't expect. And I think that maybe I don't know. We're not here to talk about the commerciality of whatever it is, but like if the audience had a hard time with it, it might be because we're so used to our comic book movies giving us the ending that we expect.
I
Yeah.
think this is fundamentally what will be one of the interesting sort of like backstories to Joker Folie à Deux. It's like, what is your what do you owe to the audience, right? Like, but I've seen these great little clips of like whoever it is, like Denis, or who's obviously doing a great job of delivering what I think is an artful, four quadrant movie, a really beautiful one that also gives people sort of what they want, but maybe, and that's maybe a smaller subset than, of Dune fans to some, I don't know. But this idea of like, what is the filmmaker's responsibility to their audience, right?
Yeah.
And there's no like Todd's one of the most practical and sort of like intelligent filmmakers as far as also recognizing the business side of it, right? He makes movies really efficiently. He doesn't overspend. He doesn't do anything the movies don't need, and and yet his movies have been actually quite successful financially. But at the same time, he's trying not to just like he's trying to play very much this balance between those things. And I think that's so admirable. And that's what we all should try to do, because I don't say you give the finger to the audience, but I think I always say, like, I don't want to decide what the movie is. I want a filmmaker to take me on a ride and tell me the movie that they're making and not ask permission from me as they go, or like, ooh, this might not be what they want, so I'm not going to do that because it's going to challenge them. I think films should be. I still believe it's an auteur medium, and I do believe directors really have to sort of be the author of that movie, and so I still believe that's it, as opposed to some big committee that AI could write it,
Mhm.
and that's, I think, the challenge that we'll be up against, because it's still a business. And when movies are expensive to put in theaters, they have to make their money back, right? And so it's this really tricky balance.
Do you have a favorite shot, scene, or sequence from the movie? Something that you go back and you go like, yeah, that moment really, it was exactly what I was hoping for. That is. I mean, is there something that you go back to, and yeah, what did you like most about?
Yeah, I mean, the Joker is me, which is like, is in the courtroom fantasy. It starts in black, and a backlight comes up, and he's just totally silhouetted. He's smoking, sitting on a little chair with a microphone, and the camera wraps around. He stands up, he beats Harvey Dent, takes Harley from the audience, and they sort of dance. And it's dark. It's got some violence, right? It's like he's shooting the cameras.
Mhm.
It's like that sequence, I felt like really like reflects the tone of this new movie, right? Which is, it's got that same thing, that moxie between Arthur Fleck and Joker. And that's the first time in the film that he's really embodying that side of Joker. And so that sequence was always one sequence I quite like. Whenever that opening shot, comes up and you just see that sort of image, I always feel like, okay, this is from where you conceive of something and then it gets visualized and you see the final product. It feels like something I'm satisfied with.
One shot that one moment that really struck me and blew my mind was the scene where they're watching the movie and Harley Quinn lights the piano on fire, and there's that shot of Joker and Harley Quinn with the projector light kind of
Yeah.
coming between them and the fire in the back right of the screen. Like I mean, like, to me it was like, firstly, like, hang that on a wall. It was just a gorgeous shot, but it was like, wow, this is like all the thematic pieces of this movie, including it being a movie, including it kind of commenting on another movie, kind of shot right at our faces in a really interesting way. And I was wondering, like, when you're reading the script, when you were reading the script, did it occur to anyone like that's an iconic moment? Almost reminded me of in the Batman when the Penguin's car is upside down and the fire is
Yeah.
behind Batman and he's walking towards, like, it just felt like elemental, emotional, primal things all coming together all at once and being shot kind of at my face as an audience member.
Yeah, that shot also came out of testing and came out of sort of discovery, which is a big part of how we make these movies, is we sort of uh everything is always played top to bottom. We look for opportunities. That one shot, I was testing basically, because you think about that and I go, well, it has to be romantic. It
Yeah.
has to be. It's their first kiss, right? So I'm like, this wants to feel at the heart, it's like a love story, even if it's a tragic one. So I'm like, this kiss has to feel really special. You have the benefit of this projector and stuff. But I remember initially I thought we'd go behind the projector, which was like one of those pull down screens, and we would see the reverse, the inverse image of That's Entertainment, from Bandwagon,
Mhm.
and you would see their silhouette kiss, right? And so we had to test that projector because we had to figure out a way where it was like a 16 millimeter projector. We tested that, but then we realized all these other machinations. We would do like a little beam splitter into a mirror and put a digital projector that would be faked inside. So inside that little thing is like a fake reel to reel and then like a digital projector. So I wanted to test it before we started shooting. And I had the stand-ins there, and we had a piece of, I think, magic cloth. We were testing some stuff, and in terms of getting the camera around to there, on its way there, before we put the screen in front of the foreground to test the idea of this
Mhm.
silhouette, we just like ran into there. And before it happened, they were just standing there. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa! And we had some smoke in there because we were testing that as well. And that image was like, oh shit, that is the image. And so I showed Todd, and he was like, oh, that's cool. And so in my mind, I'm like, we'll get back to there. We'll get back to there. And that's what, so we've sort of reverse engineered to say, oh, well, that probably is that iconic image of that first kiss when that happens. And so that's how we discovered that, was sort of in prep. But yeah, I do. And of course, for yeah, the warm light of the fire and the projector light, which is quite cool, and the flares. And yeah, of course, like I wanted it to be something special. I wanted it to feel like, a moment,
I think that the movie does a great job of recognizing the madnesses and insanity of like mental illness, but at the same time also the madness that people experience being in love, and kind of how much of that conversation comes into the visuals. Are you guys talking about these different levels of madness and insanity as you're going through it? Because I feel like the movie does a really good job of kind of surprising you at moments of like, oh, now we're inside of someone's head. Now we're inside this fantasy sequence. Now we're inside the rest of the story. Can you talk a little bit about how you identified these transitions or not transitions, how you decided how you'd get in and out of sequences?
Yeah, for us, it really is a love story. And they both are experiencing this, this like roller coaster that is, particularly for Arthur, who has never been in love. This is like he's never kissed anyone. I mean, right? Even when in the beginning of the movie when he's in the yard and one of the inmates is like, "Oh, he said you'll teach me how to kiss." It's like Arthur doesn't know how to kiss. You know what I mean? The irony of like even that, and again, it's like there's a lot of nuance in there that's like Arthur doesn't, he's gonna teach him how to kiss. He doesn't know how to kiss. It's like that, even that irony, right? It's like this is his first love, and his only really. It's like, so to me, it would be like just same way we would attack anything. You go, what is the content of this scene emotionally? And then what can we do photographically to sort of like embody it in lighting wise and all that. So even when she's like excitedly going to court in her new makeup and singing to herself in her bathroom, it's like, okay, that should be alive with light. It's like a joyful moment for her, even though the night before Arthur basically, gets crap beat out of him by the guards, right? And more. And he's having the worst night of her life, and she's anticipating this great morning in which he's gonna, have his final statement in court. and that sort of dichotomy of those two things, right? He's in the worst place he's been, and she's joyfully in love and singing about it and all that. And so we really just attack it scene by scene and just like, oh, this should be, all the things we've done. And interestingly enough, we don't talk about it that much. We really build in the environment to light too. So that's a huge part of it. So we prep everything really meticulously as far as like the lighting and give ourselves options so that on the day when the actor is in front of the lens, we then are able to just make little refinements, but really feel it, right? Feel it in there, right? So, when he thinks she's lying and she's in the court, when she's in the visiting center and he's confronting her and he's like, "Are you lying to me?" And she has to come clean and go, "Yeah, okay, I did lie to you. Everyone lies," that whole scene. It's like they're literally divided by glass, right? All the things that are in there are built into the script, but then we try to sort of like, okay, this is a scene about confrontation, so it really wants to be in long lenses, and it wants to be where they're sort of on top of each other, even though they're separated by glass. So it's like piece by piece, we make these like, decisions in terms of how we're going to light them and how we're going to photograph them. But it's less talking than you'd think. It's not like we have these long conversations about there, and maybe it's because we worked together for 15 years and we don't have to as much anymore.
Yeah, I think the shorthand's real, and it definitely comes through. And I think it also probably makes your days easier. Ben, do you have anything else? I know we've been going for a little over our time here. Was there some other Joker 2 related questions you want to get in?
Well, I mean, to me, this was more about like an influence or something that it brought to my mind while I was watching it, and I didn't know if it was in your minds while you were creating it. But I'm watching it, and it was especially the singing guards. The fact that the guards are kind of singing in jovial and kind of have a collegiality with the prisoners. And it weirdly brought me to Frederick Wiseman's Titicut Follies. And I wondered if you guys had looked at that, because the more I thought about it, it's like, obviously it's not a black and white film. It's not even really monochromatic. It's pretty colorful, but like the drabness of the prison and sort of the weird relationship with the guards. This may be more about the writing and the directing and the production design, but I was wondering if that was in the mix anywhere, because it just kept coming up to me over and over again.
Yeah, it's a great catch. Absolutely. Titicut Follies, I think, was influential to Todd and Scott when they were writing it. I think that sort of macabre aspect of these really tragic inmates in that documentary, and that lead guard who's just like, it's like he's trying, he's got cameras in front of him for this documentary, and it's like his opportunity. That movie is brilliant. It's almost like a version of The Office, because you've got this like guard that's out of step with the place in which he works, right? Like he's trying to find.
Well, you're kind of like, well, there's
something
something just as wrong with the guards in that movie as anyone in that prison is how
Yes.
it comes across. I'm sure in reality that's not the case. But.
No, but that's exactly right. Which is like, this is his life. He lives there too, right?
Yeah.
And this is like, but yet he's in charge. He has power. And so his life is slightly different than theirs. But yes, that movie is brilliant, and definitely had some influences on Joker too. Yeah, for sure. So good catch, Ben.
Oh, yeah.
Not a lot of people have seen that film. It is on ShotDeck though, so you can check it out.
Titicut Follies. Yeah, it's something that I recommend. We actually had Frederick Wiseman on the podcast, and
amazing.
Yeah. I mean, like, Titicut Follies, to me changed my opinion of what documentary could even be. It's so great.
Well, and as documentaries can really change, it changed that Bridgewater institution. I think it also changed the way inmates are treated. Like, it really shined a light on how we treat those that are incarcerated or those that are mentally ill in prison.
Now they don't let them do musical variety shows.
They know they do more, but they do less beatings, I think. Is what they
less nose feedings.
Yeah, I think less of like, and but there's like, yeah, exactly. It's yes. So I think that is a good catch as far as an influence. Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, I think that's a great place for us to leave it. Lawrence, is there a place online? Do you do any social media that people can connect with you or follow you out there? Are you one of those?
Yeah, I'm on. I don't post as much as I should, but I'm on Instagram on, I think, Lawrence Sher DP. There's somebody who always every once in a while sort of pretends to be me, but you'll see it's not.
It was a leading question. I knew you were there. We're going to put a link to it. But I wanted you to be able to plug
But yeah, but also, we do interviews on ShotDeck, and you can find those on YouTube at ShotDeck, and they're called Shot Talks. So we do those and all that good stuff. But yeah.
And I believe as we're talking today, Joker Folie Deux drops on Max. So if you have Max, definitely you can check. People can check that out.
It's on Max. You can find it there, and then I think it also goes into Blu-ray. I think in a couple of days. So I think maybe on the 17th or something. So we're big fans of hard media here at ShotDeck, and otherwise, I'm a big fan. So it also is on Blu-ray coming up soon. You can pre-order it. Not that I get any money from it, but I like whoever does, like Dave Zaslav, to get a couple more coins.
Yeah, that guy.
By the way,
I was just going to GoFundMe for him.
I'll speak to two things because I've obviously the release of Joker, particularly early on, had all these like things of like people upset at whatever the budget of the movie and all these other things. I will say one thing, and this is really appreciative of Warner Brothers, and this is not just a suck up thing, but we shot the movie, almost 90% of it in Los Angeles, which is actually more expensive.
What?
Yeah.
I never would have guessed that
most
in a million
things,
years.
Like all the stage work, right?
Yeah.
And I remember at some point where people were like, Todd demanded to shoot. No, that wasn't the case at all. But the thing that I want to say, because I've never been able to have a voice to say it, is God bless whoever, Warner Brothers, Zaslav, Pam and Mike, whoever said, yeah, you know what? This movie is going to end up being more expensive than if we shot it in London, or if we shot it in another country, or we shot it in another state that had bigger incentives, because it's so rare to shoot in Los Angeles. And yet so many of my crew and so many of the people that I work with day to day live in Los Angeles. And what a blessing, because we shoot short days. And it was one of the best experiences making the movie because I was able to go home every night, as well as all my crew. And that alone is a blessing. And for a movie that made so much money for the first one, good on Warner Brothers for allowing us to do that, because sometimes it's like not just about money, and it's about a bigger picture. And I think that should be commended. And so to that, it's almost like whoever was knocking it about like, oh, that made the movie more expensive than it needed to be, it's all right. It's going to come out in the wash. The first one made a shitload of money.
You did. You're here. Although Hollywood accounting probably still has it as,
Exactly.
Lawrence Sher, thank you so much for being on the show. I can't wait to see what you're shooting in Australia. Can you talk about it?
Yeah, looking forward to it. It's a movie for Netflix with Charlize Theron. So
right.
Yeah.
Excellent.
But I also have a really cool film coming out next year for Warner Brothers called The Bride with Christian Bale and Jesse Buckley that Maggie Gyllenhaal directed.
Oh, awesome.
And that
sweet.
one, that I finished earlier this year. And man, that was one of the best scripts I've ever read. Maggie is the real deal as a director. And I'm excited for people to see that. Yeah. So, and the combination of those two actors, Christian Bale and Jesse Buckley, holy shit, they're awesome together.
Sweet.
Excellent.
There you go.
All right. Well, we'll have to have you back on when that comes out, and we'll chat about it. We'll chat about it some more. All right. Thanks, Larry.
You got it. Great. Thank you, guys. This was really fun.
All right. So that was our interview with Larry Sher. Larry, again, thanks for coming on the show. It was so wonderful to chat about the movie, and I really hope a lot of people go and watch it. I love it.
Give it a shot. I mean, honestly, it's
on Max. Go see it.
I don't believe it deserves the bad rap that it has. I mean, not only does it just look phenomenal and fantastic, but it's really good at subverting what you expect out of a movie like that. Sort of like what Larry was saying in the interview.
Exactly right. So, Ben, it is bill paying time. We got to thank our fine sponsors of the show. Today, we're thanking our friends over at Arri, makers of cameras and lenses and lights. And they have a new camera. In fact, they announced it about 2 weeks ago. It was perhaps one of the worst kept secrets in Hollywood, as it had been making the rounds and being shown to people, myself included, months ago. It also has been in development for more than 10 years. It is the Arri 265. It is a new version of their 65mm camera. It is about the same size as an Alexa Mini, so it is much, much, much smaller, yet it has this massive 65 millimeter sensor, and that sensor is so big, in fact, and they wanted to have in-camera filtration. People who are familiar with cameras and camera technology will understand how difficult it might be to put filters inside the body of the camera, at least a filter wheel. Well, Arri solved that. They essentially made a filter slot, which is sort of old school Panavision sort of thing, where an externally accessible slot where you slide a filter in behind the lens. They have a big old 65 millimeter glass filter that slides in there. And I thought that was pretty cool. They added an awful lot of features and functions into this camera. But the number one thing people are going to be talking about is, of course, the massive sensor size. It also is way more power efficient than the current crop of Arri cameras, which are all pretty respectable. But this one somehow gets more efficient. So they did longer battery life and a really small camera package. I expect that as they start shipping in the early year, and it looks like it's going to be a rental only. There was some debate, it sounded like for a while, whether or not this is going to be something that anyone could buy, but it sounds like at first it's going to be an Arri rental item only. Maybe there will be the ability to purchase it in the future. That's a little murky right now, but it's a beautiful, beautiful camera, and I expect that top headlining feature films like Joker and Joker 2, which were shot on the Alexa 65, are now going to be looking at the Alexa 265 because it's just smaller and in every way better. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens.
I'm sure next year when we're talking to people who are nominated for the Oscar, they will have shot their film on this camera.
Yeah, indeed. So anyway, there's more information over at the Arri website, arri.com. So check it out if you're interested in looking at a camera that you cannot buy, but you can rent. So there you go.
And now, short ends.
All right. So Ben, it is our famed short end time of the show. It's a time we talk about our pet obsessions. It's a time when we talk about maybe a rant, or it's a time that we talk about whatever it is that is you're all about this week. What are you about? What do you got going on?
Well, okay. So the thing I want to talk about, I can't actually see because I cut the cord and I don't have Turner Classic Movies. However, there's a documentary that I believe premieres tonight as we're recording this, which is December 17th. And it's called From Darkness to Light, and it's directed by Michael Lurie and Eric Friedler. And it is a documentary, drum roll please, about the film, keep the drum roll going, The Day the Clown Cried. Oh my God.
What?
And I know we've talked about The Day the Clown Cried on here before, but The Day the Clown Cried is a movie that Jerry Lewis made in the early 70s. It was like 1972. And Jerry Lewis came on board to direct a movie about a clown who is put in a concentration camp in World War II and entertains the children as he brings them into the gas chambers. And if that sounds like it's in somewhat poor taste.
Yes, it does.
The few people out there who have seen it, including Harry Shearer, who has seen a rough cut of the film, support that's just the beginning of the poor choices Jerry Lewis made as director. And because he put a lot of his own money into this movie, Jerry Lewis shelved the movie and basically said that it couldn't be seen, I believe, until 5 years after he died. And so this documentary has new interviews with people, including Martin Scorsese. There's some clips that you can see online where Martin Scorsese is talking about it. But I guess it has Martin Scorsese, Harry Shearer, Sarah Silverman, and Mel Brooks talking about this legendary. There are lost movies. There are movies like London After Midnight that burned up in vault and we can't see them anymore. Despite the fact that people, like old silent classic. This is a movie where the very public, very famous star and director, Jerry Lewis, put it on a shelf and never finished it. And I'm sure that there's a lot more to the story that will be revealed in this documentary. But I heard about this movie when I was in college, and it's become kind of like a low-level obsession of mine. Whenever it pops up in the news, I'm like, I want to know everything there is to know about The Day the Clown Cried. there was talk, since it's been, I think, 5 years since Jerry Lewis passed away, that there was going to be a screening at the Library of Congress. And my friend Mike Manello and I were like, if they do this screening, we both have to go to the Library of Congress to watch the screening. But apparently that's not what they're doing. They're making it available for scholars. How does one become a scholar of this movie?
I don't know.
I mean, like, what kind of PhD do I need to get so I can watch The Day the Clown Cried? Because then I can start applying to colleges to get that PhD. But anyway, if you have Turner Classic Movies, check out From Darkness to Light. It should be available right now. Hopefully it'll be on any of the many streaming services that I do subscribe to. And God damn it, I cut the cord. And if I would have known that this was coming, probably would have waited till now to cut the cord. And I mean, like, that would have been several thousands of dollars down the drain, but still.
Yeah, that's damn. I don't know what to say about that.
I mean, you're aware of this movie, right? Like,
oh yes, we've talked about this movie. So,
yeah.
But I'd be very curious. Actually, it doesn't. I think there was once a time in my life where I absolutely would have been like, couldn't wait to see that movie. But you know what? As I've gotten older, I feel like I have less time for less movies and I have to be more selective. And so I don't.
Oh,
know.
I would make time for this one.
I know you would. I would wait to hear back what you thought of this one. I think before I.
Well, I mean, like,
Jerry Lewis was so embarrassed. He didn't want anyone to see it. I don't know if I have to see it. So I mean, it sounds like a train wreck. Coming at you at full speed.
I don't know. Well, and also it's like from a time like if you saw The Other Side of the Wind, the Orson Welles movie that that got finished a couple of years ago. It was like, that wasn't a lost movie. That was a movie Orson Welles very much wanted to finish, and it got like locked up in litigation and various ownerships and et cetera, et cetera. This is a movie that was shelved. I don't know. It's like, supposedly, when Life is Beautiful, the Roberto Benigni film of the late 90s came out, Jerry Lewis was incensed that was his, he stole my bit. That was my bit. I was going to be the guy who was a hilarious clown in a concentration camp. And apparently he was very angry. So I'm all in on The Day the Clown Cried. Cannot wait to see it. And does it sound like it's in terrible taste? It sounds like it's in horrendous taste. I still cannot wait. Anyway.
Okay. Wow. All right.
So top that with your short end.
Look, I can't top that, but it is sort of about obscure movies. I have slept entirely on the app and social network known as Letterboxd. Are you familiar with? I have not. Look, it was only this weekend that I logged in for the first time, and so I can't even give a really good review of this, but so far, I think I'm obsessed. It seems very cool. It seems like a great way to track all of the movies that you've ever seen, and make your own review, which I intend to start using as soon as I can remember my login credentials or have to reset it. But like, I probably spent a good chunk of time there going like, holy crap, look at all this and look at these people and look at this thing. And the app seems awesome. So look, I plan to use it on a tool to actually remember some of the more forgettable things that I've seen. And then I'm also planning on using it, as a way to possibly maybe find good recommendations from folks that have similar tastes to myself. So, Letterboxd. Who knew? I mean, I guess everybody knew. I'm late to this party, but yeah, it seems in case there's two other people.
If IMDb was a social app.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah, that's kind of it. And now I'm like, I had met people who had mentioned it in the past, but I just had never gone there. It's like same thing like Blue Sky. I've never been to Blue Sky, never been to some of these other places. I should get there. I should get there eventually. And Letterboxd has finally happened to me. So very short, very sweet. My short end this week, Letterboxd.
Nice.
So
Ben, I've been on Letterboxd for a while, and actually there was a thing that was called Get Glue that was kind of the same thing where you would log in for movies, and this is 10 years ago at least. And I had been very diligent about it, and then they turned it into something else. I forget what it was, and I just kind of lost the thread and stopped caring. And so I'm lousy about updating Letterboxd, but I'm lurking on Letterboxd all the time.
Nice. All right.
Also, I want you mentioned something about Blue Sky there, and I feel like this is a perfect time to plug that we are now, Cinepod is now on Blue Sky. The Cinematography podcast is thecinepod.bluesky.social. So if you're on Blue Sky, as I am, please go on there, follow me. I'll follow you back. and follow the Cinepod, and it'll sort of be like X, but with fewer Nazis.
We could all use less Nazis in our life, for sure.
Except the Nazis. I mean, I guess they want more Nazis.
Yeah, well, they know where to go.
Nazi it up, Nazis, I say, but I'm going to go to a different social app.
I can't say that. Okay. So Ben, where can people find you? They want to track you down outside the show.
You can find me at benrock.com, and also you can, like I just said, I'm Neptune Salad at Blue Sky. So look me up on Blue Sky at Neptune Salad, and that's about it. Also, as always, Needs a Werewolf on Facebook. Go to Facebook, join my Needs a Werewolf group. Go see the movie. Go see Stephen C. Miller's movie Werewolves. It's still in theaters somehow, even though I wish it were doing better. But how about yourself, Ilya? Where can people find you?
You can find me at Hot Rod Cameras, primary sponsor of the show, hotrodcameras.com. You can order all kinds of gear. If you don't see gear there that you want or is not in stock, we actually have this really cool function that's up in the corner called Request a Quote. Anything you possibly want, you can type in a request a quote, and then you can click in the message portion there and say, hey, I didn't see this thing on your website. I want this, or I'm looking for this. And guess what? You can actually save a few bucks. It's kind of an interesting thing. You say like, hey, do you have any margin on this? Is there something you can do? People who request quotes can save extra money at hotrodcameras.com. It's a cool function. Not a lot of people take advantage of it. I felt like it was important for me to point it out because, frankly, there is no need to pay retail price on some items. Some items actually have decent margins. Most of them don't. A lot of them have single-digit margins, but occasionally we get some things out there that have good margin, and we can help you out with a deal. So if you didn't know that you could get a deal on Hot Rod Cameras, you absolutely can. Use the request a quote function. All right,
haggle. That's where people can find you at haggling.
They can find me at Hot Rod Cameras, sometimes answering those quotes. So if someone's like, oh, I want a quote on this, yeah, absolutely, we can help you with that. So anyway, Ben, who do we have to thank this week? Who made this show possible?
As always, our amazing producer, Alana Cody, she told us both before this that we are like booked through the middle of January. We have so many interviews, and some of them are already in the can, and we have some other ones coming up fast. So big thanks to her. We would be nowhere, I tells you, without Alana. We should thank Michael Dispenza, our editor, whose job I think we made only a little complicated today, but like we'll see how he does. He can call me up and yell at me for running my yap. And last but not least, we got to thank Kay Zalatrachi, who created all the music that you've heard on today's podcast. Check him out at musicbykays.com. Somebody email this man and ask him a question or something. Like, he's really smart. Anyway, Ilya, you want to take us out?
Thanks for tuning in.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.